She won't maneuver her way out of this one.
I am the vilest of the vile. A traitor, a devourer of nations and infants. I am an ultra.
She raises the corner of her mouth, smirking, revealing a canine.
An ultra-liberal. It's a type of liberal. From the revolution. It's, not the moderate kind. Haven't you heard? I am a nether creature of the Forbidden Swamp. One of those who pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. I can see you thought I'd gone extinct. No sane person identifies as an ultra-liberal anymore. Not in broad daylight. You're a centrist at heart. A real moralist. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, do you find me frightening?
In her green eyes you see a mixture of truth and self-satire. Decades of guilt and pride.
I do hope so. I hope we're able to remain collegial despite it. Remember, we were partners, whether you like to admit it or not. There's blood on many hands, I assure you. When the dust settled, the Liberals were the only ones left to clean up the mess. By virtue of their survival, they were handed enormous power to shape the future. This was all our last generation managed. With due respect to our overlords, the eternal caretaker government that keeps Martinez a monument to the efficacy of its artillery.
While a gentle wind sweeps the streets in the rebuilt east, light drizzle washing it clean, lights go up and motor carriages circulate the tracks.
I would not have relinquished sovereignty to the Coalition. Not here in Martinez, and not in the Stella Maris or Delta Beachheads either. If not for my own sake.
She realizes her small, cold fists are clenched. She loosens them.
Then for my daughters. We had an obligation to defend our sovereignty. We should have burned the whole Isla down rather than let them have it.
Dark orange flames reflect in her green eyes. An oil fire on the ocean.
Perhaps. My intellectual vanity will be my undoing. Yes, I suppose I am. But I wouldn't be a patriot anywhere but here.
Seditious talk, man.
Yes. Whatever else I am, I'm also a mother. And a wife. Now, shall we return to reality? A bird? A sphenicid? A flightless bird of the polar regions? Ah! This is the pier of Rue de Saint-Ghislaine, 33A, where the tenants have been kind enough to rent me a slot. Or two. A pre-revolutionary tenement. Old buildings are called tenements, you see. And new buildings, bâtiments. After les bâtiments nouveaux. But 33A and 33B are not nouveau. They're old. This one used to be 8 to 10 stories tall. A real high-rise by the standards of the last century. Built to mirror the skyscrapers across the bay in the Delta. That was before the war, of course. Mostly the urban middle class, I believe. This was once primo real estate, before the cannons lopped 4 or 5 stories off.
Splat, splat.
Wonderful. The girl in the old lady rags? Looks like a sullen and rebellious member of a teen infraculture. Yes, you and I belong to the supraculture. We're common, the herd. The music on the radio, the food in the chain restaurant, those are all too popular for the girl in the old lady rags. She prefers a fantasy world, an infraculture with its own dress code and vernacular. It is an illusion, I'm afraid. There is no refuge from the supraculture. I can't. That's how simple it is. One may dye their hair green and wear their grandma's coat all they want. Capital has the ability to subsume all critiques into itself. Even those who would critique capital end up reinforcing it instead. All right. What next?
Suddenly, you're not so sure you're part of the supraculture.
And what would that be? I can see that, yes. I dabble in those dark arts myself, not so long ago. I assure you, it was a thoroughly supracultural phenomenon. All permeating. Downright mandatory. Nothing infra about disco, baby. Those days are long behind me. And even in the early 30s, I would say I was more of a new girl. Disco was a minor, but still enjoyable facet of the whole thing for me. The new, a cultural era, and the name of the decade it ravished, the 30s. It came out of post-revolutionary Revachol. It was ultra-liberal. It involved lots of partying, as you might imagine, and champagne-coloured everything. By the looks of it, that would have been when you came of age. Now. Of course, you're much more grounded. A serious detective on a case called Reality. Speaking of, is there anything else?
What is all of this? The scent, the sound, the air.
What world? The only one, I suppose. The world of matter. And its pale antipode.
The camera of her mind glides over the surface of the water.
Great bodies of water. Forest-covered surfaces, clusters of light where the cities lie. You've seen the montage. We all have. This world is enough.
It must be. This is the greatest and the kindest arrangement the atoms had in them.
Indeed, there is a term of endearment they coined for it in the DeLorean century, when humanity was high on this world, discovering more and more of it, these archipelagos included. Elysium. It does. There are those who would call it hell. A term of hatred that originates, like many such things, with the Mesk petro-fascists. Oh, you want a picture of the world? There is no complete set yet, dear. They're having some trouble reaching orbit. Great things are difficult to achieve. For now, we're viewing the world from the inside, sideways. We used to think it was a sphere, but that is beginning to look less and less likely by the day. You wouldn't know it from the tabloids, but the ORG nations have been launching weather balloons into the lower ionosphere since the 30s.
ORG, Occident Remscheid.
There's a steadily increasing trickle of images. Between the big three scientific contributors, they're piecing together a dark grey corona. Yes. Pale covers 72% of the surface. There are grey flares and prominences, even arcs above entire isolas. The images are blurry, but if there was a sphere in there, it certainly looks like it fractured a long time ago. They say there is a rarefied envelope of matter surrounding the darkened disk of our planet. That is, if we are still living on a planet. Or, to speak more plainly, imagine vast swathes of land disrupted by nothingness. I am sorry, dear. It must sound quite terrifying through the acute encephalopathy. Even scientific positivism isn't entirely convinced about what we're dealing with here. But this is one of the greatest questions of our time. Maybe when they get the complete set together, it will jolt us out of our rut, bring us together, however naive it may sound. I don't know about things of that scale. My expertise lies in nations and trade routes, one or several layers below everything. But yes, we'll be fine. Don't worry.
She does not seem convinced that you'll be fine. If anything, she's realizing how deep your condition runs.
You have misimagined it. I don't have the power to convey to you the effect and geometry of the images that depict our world from below low orbit. It's like the crowning of the world. It's insane. Very disco. You'd love it. See? Everyone finds something worth holding on to in this world, however wasted its opportunities.
The cold seeps into you. The air is heavy with 80% humidity. Suddenly, you're conscious of yourself standing there, on whatever this all is. Your arms hang down by your sides. The lieutenant observes you both, silently. He adjusts his glasses.
The Pale is not, technically speaking, part of reality.
Yes. Also, I think we've had enough excitement for today. Remember, we have a cadaver to attend to.
Of course, Lieutenant. Let's try something else. I don't think your colleague would appreciate that. He has already been so patient with this whole exercise. Let's continue with something else, all right? You can ask about anything else in the world. Anything.
You could sneak back later when the lieutenant is not here, unless you can convince him to step aside.
Glad to have been of assistance. The little that I know. Anything else?
Why, yes I am.
Of course there are. We're on an archipelago. How else are you supposed to get around? Yes, we are. We are on Le Caillou.
Technically, the neighboring Ozone and Fas Alamer island groups are archipelagos, while La Caillou, by contrast, is a single fertile landmass, the fourth largest island in the world. It is not an archipelago.
Okay, if you want to get technical. The point is, we're all on islands here, and sail is still the most expedient way to get from one island to another, especially when you're in a hurry to resolve a strike. I haven't seen anyone else drive a souped-up Capri Kenema motor carriage either.
Actually, that motor carriage has been specially issued to serve as a patrol and pursuit vehicle. It's for crossing long distances in the greater Ravachol industrial harbor. It's not a toy.
Neither is this. A toy, I mean. It's a machine for crossing long distances in the Bay of Revachol, between the city and the islands.
You need to make this lady admit she's only riding around on this boat because she's rich. Before you do, it would be pertinent to ask other questions. Gather more info on this boat of hers.
The boat? No. It is called Cordelati 19 because that's the type of sloop it is.
The word "it" feels strange. Such a beautiful boat deserves a proper name. A breeze ripples through the sails and tugs at your hair. Below, the sleek, fish-like shape of the hull parts the water. Beneath that, a resounding darkness. You're reminded of something, or someone.
Okay. How about Cordelati 19? Why? Because it was manufactured in Revachol East by a company called Cordelechi, and its hull is 19 paces long.
She makes a point of being unromantic about it.
Why Dolores? Well, it means nothing to me. I think I'll stick with the factory name. But thank you for the suggestion. It's a pleasure craft. A 19-pacer. It also happens to be rated for Category 1 racing. Though these days I mainly use it for business. My sloop? I like it a lot. It's the eel's hips, baby.
I'm enjoying this part of the interview. It has so little to do with the murder we're investigating.
Officer, I assure you I'm a highly qualified pleasure craft operator.
The crowns of her teeth are porcelain, white as the boat's hull as she smiles. Her nonchalance might be related to something called the Wayfarer Act, a law that says she doesn't need a license. Sly fox, you're not aggressive enough to harass her further on this.
Oh my, the E word. You mean to say that it's a symbol of conspicuous consumption? That I'm a member of the ruling class?
Detective, may I remind you that Mrs. Messier is a professional negotiator.
Then what does that say? Does it say docking reserved for residents of Rue de Saint-Ghislain, 33A? "33A? This old proletarian haunt here? As I said, plenty of people drive boats, of all social strata.
She takes a sip.
Okay.
Nothing happens for quite a while. It doesn't.
My, it's as if there's a tiny spinner on the side of his head and he's reeling thoughts out.
Except he isn't.
Of course. No worries. We can just go back to discussing my fast, large, interminably middle-class boat. Good. What we do? I'm afraid I don't speak for Wild Pines as a whole. It's a giant undertaking.
There was a touch of discomfort there. She wants to merely represent.
The Pine's core competency is logistics. Container shipping, freight, that sort of thing. See those airships there, blinking? Those are the shipping side of things. And that is the terminal. Another subdivision deals with energy, oil and gas exploration, offshore platforms.
The Wild Pines Group is one of the original Revacholian Indo-tribes. Companies awarded royal monopolies by the king, the suzerain himself, centuries ago. The king is long gone, but several of the Indo-tribes remain. Saint-Baptiste, Elysium, an unknown entity known as Brightest Star.
Why, thank you. I'm not at liberty to discuss the company balance sheet, but I can tell you that last year, the company booked more than 20 billion real in revenue. And to think, there are years when the group books losses in the billions. Pines employs 72,000 people, all of whom have families that depend on their salaries. It is a tremendous responsibility. They started as an exploration and cargo fleet conducting trade between the Samaran and Insulindian Isolas 250 years ago, when Pine ships explored the South Seminese and charted Lomantang on behalf of the suzerain. Centuries of care, deliberation, and madness have gone into this endeavor. Vessels pass through the great unrest to re-emerge with apricots in tow. The logic of the system is totalizing. It's taken everything from its employees to build it. You know more than you let on. Certainly it helped, but most of the original Indo tribes have failed, or been absorbed. To survive, Wild Pines had to grow and adapt. No suzerain did that. You mean aside from being the terminal's legal owners? Who are responsible for moving 8% of the world's cargo? There are no minor cogs in the system. Each terminal must be accounted for, lest the entire system break. Every hiccup in such a system means thousands lose their jobs, the world over. I'm here to assure that doesn't happen. Everything. Right up to, but not including, trade secrets. First, you'd have to repeal the Emergencies Act of Trade in Aliments that gives me the right to silence. It's quite the octopus.
The octopus that straddles Revachol, the Emergencies Act, is the cornerstone of post-war Revachol, inseparable from the world it created.
Good luck is only kept in place by the vested interests of half the civilized world, including your own.
What the ma'am means is that the Emergencies Act and the RCM both get their authority from the coalition government.
But I am derailing us. You wanted to know about the strike. I believe the official title is Senior Labour Negotiator. In practice, I'm a grocery clerk. I relay the union's demands to Wild Pines and return with Wild Pines' counteroffer.
And how are the talks going?
They're not. That's the problem. The union stopped all negotiations a week ago, after that awful lynching took place.
Wait, she just admitted that the lynching and the strike are connected.
Now they won't even let me into the harbour. There's a 2-meter 20 racist behemoth blocking the gates. Yes, I believe there is a connection, but that's a subject for later. Yes, Jean-Luc Measurehead. Let's say I was not making the kind of progress I'd hoped for when I first arrived.
And when did you first arrive?
I arrived 3 weeks ago. Yes, in the middle of February. The bay was still partially frozen then. I prefer to do these things on site, like the RCM.
But the strike began in December.
I wasn't the original negotiator here. I took over after Mr. Gaumont hit a wall with Mr. Clare, the union boss. Mr. Clare refused to speak with Gaumont despite concessions he'd granted the union in prior negotiations.
This isn't the first time the union has gone on strike.
Heavens, no. There have been 2 prior strikes. Both times the union won significant concessions, including overtime pay and a medical plan. This time their demands are more, I guess you could say, aggressive.
Ludicrous even. It's meant.
Mr. Clare told him to... how did he put it? Fuck off, midget. Gaumont is short of stature, you see. Yes. Keep in mind, this is a negotiator Mr. Clare has worked with before, and who was more than fair with him and the union. There are leaflets everywhere, and banners. What did they say again? Oh yes. Every worker, a member of the board. In its defense, another said, demand democracy. Pretty tame stuff compared to every worker a member of the board. Fortunately, they explained it. Every time the Wild Pines group makes a decision about anything, it needs the signature of each of the 2,200 workers in its Martinez terminal. Just so you understand, this is but one of 22 terminals owned by Wild Pines. Essentially, not only are they kings of the company, they are also kings of the 72,000 employees of Wild Pines Group. They're having a blast. But how can they afford it? After 4 months, my assumption was they would prefer a more practical solution. I'm not sure. Naturally, I assume that was just their opening position, a hard-nosed tactic with a side of mockery. But there's been no follow-up, just the same nonsensical slogan repeated over and over again. And now, people are getting lynched, I hear. Behind the whirling in rags. A disastrous situation if there ever was one.
Excuse me, from whom did you hear about this lynching?
I first heard it from the bowyer at the gates. The one whose very name advertises his aversion to work. I think he said it was, "Call me mañana."
This checks out.
The scabs? You mean the huddled masses of Jamrock, come to plead for work where the Union refuses to?
Don't let her answer it herself.
If these workers were organized by Wild Pines or its affiliates, then it would be a company secret. I could not share it with you. Not yet, at least.
It's implied she's open to discussing this matter with you at a later occasion.
Everard Clare is a man of the utmost integrity. If you can say one thing about him, it's that he always puts the interests of the workers first. Of course not. Everard is fantastically corrupt. I imagine he has a thick, viscous goo where you and I have blood. He is the most corrupt individual I have ever seen, and I deal with men like him for a living. If there is anyone more venal, more irredeemably nepotistic, then it's his twin brother, Edgar. Yes, Edgar looks exactly like his brother, except for that lazy eye. He also talks exactly like Everard does. And when one's term as foreman is up, the other takes over. It's how they circumvent the term limits, you see, with a funny little switcheroo. While in office, they've embezzled God knows how much of their workers' dues. The Débardeurs Union was once a perfectly normal institution. 20 years ago, anyway. It must not have been easy to establish under the Emergency Act, but they did it. I can respect that. Organised labour at its best, as they say. Then something happened in the local chapter elections. The brothers Clare came and transformed it into a... how do you say...
A mob. The Débardeurs are a crime syndicate. Sad as it may be, I suspect we'll be forced to cooperate with them.
Refreshingly honest, officer. The company has tried appeasing in the past, but I'm afraid our concessions have only emboldened Everard and his brother. And your opinion, detective, if I may ask? I'm a curious and talkative person, you see. Would you say the Débardeurs Union is... Indeed. And a hungry one. Sadly, Wild Pines have cooperated with what amounts to a crime syndicate for 2 decades. However much you feed the leech always hungers. I'm glad you asked. There was a woman, the previous forewoman of the Union. She disappeared.
Disappeared?
Yes. On the last day of the local chapter elections, her daughter phoned in and said she wasn't running anymore. Or coming to work. Ever. End of story.
This forewoman, her name?
Sadly, the company records do not even give a name. She's just forewoman. In private correspondence, Holly. I don't even know if it's a sir or given name, and I don't have access to the Union's files. Downright haunting, if you ask me. The Wild Pines suspected foul play, but what could they do? It was a Union matter. The point of the presentation is, these kinds of things happen around the Clares. Watch out when you're dealing with him.
Thank you for your concern, man. We'll be just fine.
Of course. How else can I help?
Finger pistol, 9mm. Snap, snap, baby. Turns out guns aren't that much for protecting as they are for attacking people. If you want to protect people, really work for them, you have to whip out your signature dual 9mm Villiers finger pistols. Who needs real guns anyway? That conversation you just had? It would have gone better had you snapped those bad boys at them. Note, 9mm dual finger pistols do not count for an actual weapon in a gunfight. It's clear you like the hard stuff, Bruder. Evening falls. the time has come to take the vow. The vows are blood and flesh. Lower intestine, the term is metabolic and circulatory system. Fascism, brota. Many things, but it's mostly about trusting your gut. Who does your gut tell you is the source of Revachel's problems? Yes, them, but also women. Women, men of war. You don't like them. They're insane. Their idiocy needs to be scrubbed off this world with rubbing alcohol. Woo men need to go back to the fucking kitchen. That's what fascism boils down to. The rest is also important. But the main thing is that women need to know their place. Stomach truth. You're having a stomach truth. Because you've said the hard things that others won't say. The good things, you've said them many times. You're going to keep your views, right? Keep your views, brota. For the nation, smart. Best not to mention the women too often. That's why you're the head and I am the stomach. Of course you are, Bruta. Of course. Hey, psst. Yes, you. Word on the street is you're ready to start building communism again. Yes, you're ready to start building communism again. You've built it before. They've built it before. Hasn't really worked out yet. But neither has love. Should we just stop building love, too? Good. We need tender men like you building gargantuan communism. Word on the street is it's going to be 10,000 times larger than any communism previously attempted by human beings. Is that right? You keep saying things like, down with the bourgeoisie, eat the rich, sodomize the landowners, impale all people who have more than 25 real in their pockets, literally murder all human beings regardless of their political beliefs. That kind of stuff. Funky style. Very funky. So tell me, do you have any questions before we fire up the big communism builder? Or do we get right down to it? Failure. It's about failure. Yes, abject failure. Total, irreversible defeat on all fronts. Absolutely vanquished, beaten, curb-stomped and pissed on. Until you came along. You will reverse the fortune of the workers of the world. You alone. against every living thing, against every human alive. 800 trillion real in the hands of an impossibly well-organized ruling class. Towering city blocks of bankmen who have the ears of prime ministers. Million-headed armies of nations and the love of your own mother. You against the atom, the charm and the spin, where the whole world failed. Matter failed to bend to human will. Human will failed to get out of bed and tie its laces. You alone, single-handedly, will rebuild the dreams of the working class. You are the last communist. Now get to work, comrade. Oh yeah, get the firing squads and the animal wagons ready. Too late to back out now. You can't make an omelette without breaking a few million eggs.